is that the US position, of course, on the applicable standards changed much earlier than that. They changed in February, in fact on February the 7th, 2002. That was the crucial moment of change, because on February the 7th, 2002, the President of the United States adopted an executive decision which said that any detainee caught in the war on terror, anyone who was alleged Al-Qaeda, had no rights under the Geneva Conventions. And that we now know was done to open the door to what are called EITs, Enhanced Interrogation Techniques, otherwise known as torture in more modern parlance. Now, although there was some public information as of 7th of February 2002, we already knew on that date there had been a change in US policy, the full details of President Bush's decision were not made publicly available. I would be astonished if the British government did not know of the full details of that change of policy, because they were already at that point involved jointly in operations in Afghanistan, and they must have known that a different standard was being applied in relation to the treatment of detainees.
So what's the earliest that you can definitively say that this information was available to the UK? I mean, we can suspect that it was the same day, but...
Well, I mean, I can only say definitively by the 14th of September 2003, I can say, as a matter of fact, someone in the UK authorities must have known, but I suspect it was as early as the 7th of February 2002, and I would be very surprised if no one in the UK authorities was aware that by the 1st of August 2002 there'd been a significant change in US practice, because that is when the waterboarding began under those legal advices. But I can't say to you as a matter of fact I am aware there was actual knowledge.
But could you answer Mr. Murray's question that he put in to us in evidence that we should ask? When did the UK first become aware of waterboarding being used by the US?
I can't answer that question. All I can say is that I would be very surprised, on the basis of the very close relationships at the governmental level and at the level of the intelligence services, if there was not knowledge by the autumn of 2002 at the latest. And the reason that I say that is that it is already in the public domain that at that point detainees with whom the United Kingdom had an involvement in relation to their identification or their questioning were being subjected to interrogations by CIA operatives under the new legal framework that had been decided as early as the 7th of February 2002. So I think the crucial period for this joint committee to look at is the period between the 7th of February 2002 and, let us say, the 1st of October 2002. I think that is the crucial period.
You touched very briefly earlier on the recent release of the 4 torture memos by President Obama in the US, and the debate that's now ensuing in the US as to what to do with that evidence in terms of criminal investigation, an inquiry, what's the form that inquiry would take. In terms of here in the UK, should we be having putting criminal investigations and potential prosecutions to one side? Should we be having an independent inquiry into complicity and torture by UK personnel?
Well, President Obama has not yet decided whether there's going to be an independent inquiry. He's chosen his words very carefully. He's left open the possibility of the current position, as I understand it, as of today, is that he has left open the possibility of a criminal investigation in relation to what he called the framers of the legal decision to move to abusive techniques of interrogation, which I suspect means the lawyers, but may go higher up to some of the policymakers and some of the politicians. And he has expressed his own lack of support for certainly a congressional inquiry, because he feels it would be too partisan and too political, but apparently is not so opposed to the idea of a blue ribbon, great and the good, looking at all these issues as a way possibly of moving on. I think the pressure in the United States is enormous, and I think it's inevitable that there will be some sort of an inquiry. When that inquiry happens, and indeed before, materials will come out which will shed light not only on the UK situation, but on the many other states that cooperated in various ways with the United States in that period, and I think that will inflame the situation in those other countries. I think it would be better for the United Kingdom to be seen to moving ahead proactively on its own steam, not pushed by third countries, and say, look, this was, as President Obama puts it, a dark chapter in our history. Let's shed some light on it, and then let's move on. I think it's better for countries to do that themselves than to wait for others to push them into doing it. So my answer, in a sense, is I think there's enough out there that requires investigation.
So what you're saying is in the UK, regardless of what the US's decision is, we should just get on with an independent inquiry?
I think in the long run that would be a more sensible way forward, because we would then be masters of our own situation and we wouldn't be waiting for the dribs and drabs of information coming out from elsewhere.
Bearing that in mind, have you given any thought as to what the form or the model of that inquiry would be? For instance, in Canada, they've got the Canadian Iraq Commission who are carrying out an independent inquiry which has made some quite important recommendations, not only about the terms of reference for the inquiry, but more about the role that it has within a democratic country. Is that the sort of model we should be looking at, or is there a better one that you think would fit in with the UK position?
Well, I think the Canadians have behaved really impeccably after their difficulties with Mr. Arar and their contribution, and I think they really can't be faulted. They, as you know, also were concerned about partisanship, and so they sent it out to an independent individual to do an independent inquiry. And it seems to me that the real danger, and I think President Obama is right to be concerned about that, is making it a partisan issue. I think, in a sense, it's a bigger issue than that. It's not a left-right issue. It's, I have to just say in relation to something that was said earlier, in sort of my own written works over the last 4 years, I've met some truly amazing people who were deep Republicans and who said, this is not us, we don't do this stuff, and who acted to stop this happening. And I've met Democrats who've taken a different view and would be happy to proceed. It's not a party political issue, and I think that the most sensible way to proceed with this would be to try to depoliticise it, and that means putting it in the hands of individuals who, in a sense, would take an independent, technical, policy and legalistic approach rather than in a political framework. There's a related and very complex question. Can you have an inquiry of a non-legal character going hand in hand with criminal investigations? And this is a very difficult issue that other countries have faced. Once you have criminal investigations, for perfectly sensible reasons, people clam up. They don't want to speak. They are themselves at risk of investigation, indictment, prosecution, whatever. And my own sense is that, at least in the initial stages, what you want is as much information as possible. It may be that in due course there will have to be criminal investigations, independent prosecutors, DPP, whatever. But I think at this point where we are right now, what we ought to be doing is what President Obama is doing, which is throwing out all the information. And I would in this way also support what Vice President Cheney has said. He wants to see the memos that show all the benefits to this type of abusive behaviour. I think I'd even go further than him and say, okay, let's put out the photos, let's put out the interrogation logs, let's put out the videos, let's put out the policy investigations which look at the consequences of the photos of Guantanamo and Abu Ghraib for inflaming the situation in Islamic countries. Let's put it all out there, but let's do it in as least a political way as possible, if that is possible, by putting it in the hands of some sort of independent commission, whether it's a judicial body or the great and the good in a depoliticised way.
But can